Welcome to Net Zero Talent Talks, the podcast where we explore how to build the teams driving the clean energy transition. I'm your host, Lindsay Warren, founder of Net Zero Evolution and a lifelong recruiter obsessed with solving the talent puzzle in clean tech. Each episode, I'm joined by inspiring leaders from EV charging, battery storage, renewables, hydrogen and sustainability, and we dig into what's working, what's not, and how to future-proof your hiring. If you care about people, planet and performance, you're in the right place. So welcome to another episode of Net Zero Talent Talks. I'm Lindsay Warren, and today we're diving into a topic that often gets overlooked but could be a game changer for businesses in the green economy, the role of interns. Our episode today, Intern today, Innovator tomorrow, and I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Carrier, CEO of Allye. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.
Absolute pleasure. Now, Jonathan, you and your team are at the cutting edge of energy storage innovation, and you've seen firsthand how interns can spark new ideas and drive real business impact. So just to get things started then, could you just share a little bit, first of all, about Allye and the role that interns have played in your journey so far?
Sure, yeah. So Allye, we build smart battery energy storage systems. They are, pretty unique in terms of their capability, both from a functional but also a kind of software capability. So much of technology today is not defined just by the hardware, but the software that controls it. So very much what we do is, we build our own physical system, but then we have a lot of software on top that creates the intelligence, both in terms of how energy is managed, but also then how that value is created from the battery, either for the end user or even back to the grid. And that's a fundamental part of how batteries are starting to transform our energy landscape, because batteries have inherently a lot of flexibility. And what we're trying to do is deliver that flexibility in a multitude of different ways, with solutions that are between kind of 300 kilowatt hours up to 1.5 megawatt hours. And these would be predominantly for kind of things like construction sites, fulfillment television, and for the utilities to use in an off-grid environment. And in an on-grid environment, they can be used anything by a factory, a charge point operator to solve grid constraints. And that's very much, the challenge and the problem that we're solving for is delivering more power where it's needed and where the grid can't deliver it, and that's at the very fundamental heart of what we do. In terms of how, interns, we've started with interns as to support our business very much from the first summer. So we started in March of 2023. In that first summer, we had our first, 2 interns, and we always knew from the very beginning that, having interns play part of our journey was, going to be very useful for us, but also a great way to be able to spot talent and give them the kind of development and early head start that they need in their career. So it's been very fundamental to helping, be beneficial on both sides to be able to find that mutual value for them and for us as a business.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's really great to hear that it was sounded like a core part of your strategy then back in March 2023 initially. And yeah. I think a lot of businesses, a lot of people still kind of picture interns as like temporary helpers or I guess cheaper support, for want of a better way of putting it. And naturally you see it as a big part of the strategy. Why do you think the mindset of those that see it as temporary support needs to shift, particularly in the green economy?
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends on the value that you place on interns and then the specific, kind of areas that they get to work on. If you work in innovation, anybody can have a decent idea. It doesn't matter whether you've got 50 years of experience or, 5 days of experience. At the end of the day, great ideas and coming up with solutions to problems is in the remit of anybody. And actually, those who are unencumbered by some of the kind of more traditional legacy ways of thinking, or even haven't worked in an industry, for a decade or so, can actually come up with some really smart ideas and apply themselves in ways that they believe they wouldn't be able to, so giving them that platform and opportunity is, kind of fundamental. So I guess it's less of a question about is it temporary or not temporary? It's more about the value and the orientation upon which you place value on the relationship with interns. I think those who view them as temporary will probably just see them, as something to kind of support maybe recruitment of graduates or, longer term recruitment. But actually, if you reframe it and think about how can we put people to give them the right platform and the opportunity to express themselves, that they wouldn't otherwise get elsewhere, you can get a lot more value out of it on both sides. So I think it's very much a mindset approach, and that mindset is much broader than just, are they temporary? Are they here, for the short term? Because actually the long-term benefit has to be considered for us as a business, but also for them as individuals, where they can get a lot more of experience, but also learn about the sort of areas that they want to work on. And that can help them in their future career. And for us, kind of final point is, we always think about putting the intern first. Their needs and their recruitment and their kind of experience that they have with us always must come first over the needs of the business. And I guess those who think of them as temporary may always want to put the needs of the business first and then those of the intern second.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And you're naturally going to get the best out of people as well, right? When you're treating them with that level of respect that they deserve in terms of making sure you're doing things that are right for them. So I guess, do you encourage your interns then to kind of question your processes or your technologies immediately, or do you prefer them to learn the ropes a little bit first?
Look, at the end of the day, anybody can question anything, as a business, and we wouldn't exist as a business because it doesn't matter whether you're an intern or someone who's got a lot of experience. Having people question and kind of interrogating what you're doing is part of the culture and the mindset of building a smarter, more resilient, better business. It's that notion of strong ideas held loosely. It doesn't really matter if there's a better way of doing something. It doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is it's based on what impact is it going to have, how much value is it going to create for the customer, what's the impact on the business, and so forth. And maybe that's where the interns need help because they don't have that rounded kind of business experience, and that's where it's incumbent on us to help them. They might, because all of our interns tend to be more technical, with the exception of a few, that they might come with the engineering smarts. Perhaps though what they're missing is some of the kind of wider business smarts, and that's an area where we definitely need to help them. So I guess it depends, it depends on the topic and the area, what they're looking at, so there's a little bit of, kind of helping them learn the ropes, but at the same time, from day one, anybody can have a fresh perspective on anything.
Yeah. And do you typically, we were talking earlier about putting the interns first, right? But naturally, there will likely be a benefit to the business, of course, when hiring interns. Do you kind of aim to recruit based on a specific type of person, or are you looking to recruit interns based on a specific type of problem you may be able to get support within the business? Which comes first?
Yeah, it's always the type of person, and that's exactly the same in our general recruitment. So it applies the same for experienced hires as it would be for an undergraduate or a graduate. Working in a startup environment isn't for everybody. It requires a certain level of resilience and, kind of flexibility that maybe some people just aren't cut out for, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong answer there. It's horses for courses, and what's right for one person might be different for another. So it's very much an orientation, a bias to someone who's a lot more adaptable, flexible, willing to learn. And you'd expect that in a kind of younger, intern or a graduate. But at the same time, I think generationally we see some fundamental shifts in terms of how people approach work, what they expect from their work, and the contribution that it can have, as a balance within their life. And clearly working in an early stage business has a balance, much more orientation to work than it does necessarily to life. So again, that kind of challenge also comes, with finding the right person. In terms of what we look for, because we are very hands-on, and we're also building physical things. We're not just coding or developing software. We tend to look for students that come from within the Formula student program. So there's quite a lot of universities in the UK and also those around the world where they run Formula student teams, and we found that those undergrads and grads tend to come with a much broader set of skills. and also more adaptability to the kind of startup environment, because they're used to having to hit deadlines and also feeling the pressure that comes working in small teams, having to kind of get the hands dirty and to innovate. And that's very much at the heart of what we do. So that's kind of one of the few selective areas that we have, not always, but, you know, it's a strong indicator for us that the person might have the right, you know, kind of personal capability, because it's also self-selecting. It's not like you get chosen to go on to the Formula student. You choose to do it, yeah, and you do it as extracurricular.
That's linked to Formula One, that is it? Or
No, it's within the IMechE, you know, so within the Institute of Mechanical Engineers and Electrical Engineers, where, you know, then the university will potentially provide some funding. You know, you can get some external sponsorship for it as well. So, you know, very much at the heart of it is about, you know, people having to use very finite resources to do something quite amazing with the very limited time that they have. And that's very akin to what it's like working in a, you know, a startup. It's not glamorous, you know, despite what people think. So, you know, having the context is, you know, and having that readiness, you know, sets them up for a better chance of success in a business like ours.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess with all those fresh perspectives that they bring, you may have a couple of examples for us, perhaps, of where they've made a real measurable difference to a specific project or initiative.
Yeah, and that varies depending on the individual. I mean, our interns come in from day one working on real things, you know, and we try to give them ownership. So a couple of examples: recent intern, one that's just finished, and one that's still here this summer. We source battery packs from, you know, to go into our energy storage system, so electric vehicle batteries, and we get them from all over the country. You know, one of the guys that joined us had done his own classic car electric vehicle conversion, you know, so he'd kind of got a lot of his hands dirty onto that kind of thing, you know, so he was helping us a lot use his experience of sourcing batteries himself, you know, with our battery sourcing, going off and around the country, you know, to go and test battery packs, but also, you know, then help us with the procurement. So that, you know, that's one good example of, you know, someone directly contributing to supporting our activities. The other example I'm talking about is a student from Oxford University who's an electrical engineer, and he's come into the business and actually started taking ownership of the battery testing, you know, capability, actually building the pack tester boxes. And he, in his time here, has not only upgraded what we had, but he's built 3 himself, you know, and they're going to be deployed out to the EV recyclers so that they can have the pack tester capability for them, so that then we can decide whether we want to buy the batteries or not. So, you know, there's real tangible examples where they're contributing to the journey. And, you know, when those interns go, they will be sorely missed. But at the end of the day, again, it comes back to them and their capabilities and their learning experience. Because what you hope is that they leave you a better person than when they joined, and they take forward not just their appreciation of what they've done and how they've done it, but, you know, the context of their contribution that can help them with their studies, completing their career, and wherever they go to next in their career, you know, and what they choose to do once they've graduated.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And do you know what? That's an awesome example of a big win-win scenario, because I think there are businesses out there who don't quite get the value yet of interns, and to try and nudge them into the direction of offering more placements to interns. Really, we do also need to communicate the business advantage to those particular companies first. That may be what gets them over the edge to bringing them in. And I think then only once they've experienced it, Jonathan, will they come to the conclusion that you and I have, where actually it's about the interns, and fantastic things can happen when they're really, really looked after and set free to be creative. Now, in your experience then, are interns kind of naturally more creative because they don't yet know what can't be done to an extent?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, because again, creativity comes down to an individual and also what their kind of predisposition is, you know, as a type of role, person, and what they want to do. Some individuals, like anything in the workplace, they prefer more structure, more guidance. Some people prefer more freedom and opportunity, you know. So what matters is, again, you treat everybody equally but differently, you know, in the sense of, you know, how they're treated fairly, but also you tune and you adapt the time that they have, and also the kind of guidance that they're given that best suits them and helping them to grow. Of course, with interns, it's very much more about perhaps you need to have a few more defined guide rails that they can work with, but that's fine, and that everyone needs, some kind of structure and definition, in the work that they do, because ultimately that can help them to be more successful, but also to learn more in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big objections from business leaders when hiring interns is the time element, right? And it's, have I got time to lead and encourage and develop more individuals? Do you kind of set yourself up with a team leader of the interns, or do you spread them out? How do you manage that part of it, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, it's partially based on, where do we see the kind of, where's the opportunity for the business to be able to contribute most to helping the interns? It's no good bringing somebody in with a particular skill if we actually haven't got the work for them to do on it. They'd be sat twiddling their thumbs. So there is a marriage of, the convenience of what the business is working on with where the skills, or at least the training and development and learning of the individual. In terms of where then that spread, of course, we give every intern a dedicated mentor, as well, which can be separate to their line manager. Of course, it can be one in the same person. And the key there is to make sure that you're not just taking care of their day-to-day needs, but you're taking care of their kind of developmental needs, and making sure that, they know that the business has their back, like any business where you're trying to make sure you get the most out of people and helping them, is that you want to build trust. And the best way is to know that people have got your back. And that's really important, that people know that they're being taken care of on a day-to-day basis, but there's also an opportunity for them to go and speak to somebody if they, want to express themselves in different ways.
Yeah, and it sounds like a really important onboarding process takes place then as well. If we're talking line managers, mentors, and then obviously being given that freedom as well to express themselves. What do you think the biggest mistakes companies make are when they try and onboard interns? Have you seen it go wrong in previous employment anywhere, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I find obviously with interns, it's a lot easier to bring them on in cohorts. So this year, what we've tried to do is bring them all in as a single cohort, and therefore give them each other as a structure as well. And that's no different to how graduate schemes are done. There's kind of camaraderie, and that they're going through the same thing together, even if their duration of their placements is different. And so we've got one who's here for a year, one who's here till Christmas, another one that ends at the end of September, one who finished last Friday. They're all different, but we did try to start them all pretty much either on the same day or within a week or two of each other, so that, collectively they could go through that experience together. And I think there's quite a lot in that kind of shared experience with each other that builds bonds and also relationships, not just, with us as a business, but between themselves. And they all come from different universities, so it's not like they would have met otherwise than their time and experience with us. So I think there's an element of, when timing is everything, but also how you bring those people on board so that they feel supported and there's a level of structure, but they're also building relationships. It's one thing walking into a business that's 1,000 people. It's a very different, thing walking into a business that's only kind of 12 people, and therefore if you can come in as a small cohort of people together, it can make you perhaps feel less isolated. And I think, that kind of consideration to how people feel, it's scary. If we all put ourselves back to when we were, undergrads or just finishing university, it's daunting coming into the workplace. So we have to think about that, and how do we help reassure them, but also give them the confidence to be as successful as possible.
And in terms of the first week then, how would you describe the perfect first week for an intern, if there is such a thing?
I don't think there is. It always depends on the individual and what they're doing. But at the end of the day, you just want somebody to feel comfortable and relaxed, that they've perhaps, made the right choice. No one wants buyer's remorse, do they? No matter what they do and what they select. And ultimately, you want somebody to feel comfortable that they can get stuck in. I mean, it's all about a positive mental attitude, isn't it? It's all about PMA. It's all about, giving people the opportunity to want to just throw themselves into it. So an ideal week is someone who just gets stuck in, first day, first morning, first hour. It doesn't have to be, it's not all this, corporate BS of setting up your laptop and whatever else, just get straight stuck into it. So for us, it's very much about that, orientation to bias, bias towards action, that you want to get stuck in, you're going to get on and do stuff. And I will always personally also take the time to speak to, the interns regularly, but also particularly at the end of the first week, to ask them, how's it been your first week? What's happened? How, what could have been done better with your onboarding? Everything should always be two-way in terms of the feedback, but also making sure that we're listening to making the experience as good as it possibly can be, but also to improve things for any future interns that we might bring on board.
Yeah, it's really great to hear, and something that a lot of businesses do with traditional hires. Get the feedback within the first sort of couple of weeks and a month, but yeah, less so with interns. It's fantastic that you do that. It sounds like they're all quite lucky to be given an experience of that nature, Jonathan, to be honest. It's really refreshing to hear. In terms of balancing, then, how do you go about giving them meaningful work? So work that is really important, but not perhaps overwhelming them or making them feel too under pressure, maybe?
Yeah, look, the work comes from what we're doing at the time, so it's not like, we can carve out a specific project. It's all dependent on what we have to deliver as a business. So giving them something meaningful means that they're getting involved from day one into something that we're actually doing. And that will be different depending on what area of the business that they're working in or the technical discipline that they're involved in. I guess the point is, we'll always try and make sure that, the buddy that they have, who, if it's not the line manager and it's not the kind of, the mentor, that there's somebody obviously that they're working alongside, so that in that first 2 weeks, they're kind of given more assigned tasks that are, bounded, so they understand the scope of them, and you're helping lead them into the right direction rather than just dropping them in at the deep end, because, that wouldn't work for anybody, would it, in terms of us and their experience?
No, absolutely not. And I think in terms of the bigger picture, then, if we look at future-proofing the talent strategy, I guess, right? Because yes, it's about the interns, and we want them to have a fantastic experience. It's also great for you if your business gets some kind of benefit from some great people that have been in for a while. And actually, I guess an even bigger benefit would be if some of the interns that you really, really click with and who do great work eventually start working for you as well. Has that been the case over the years for you? Have you onboarded any?
Yeah. So we've got, people who are, were interns and have gone permanent. We've got interns that want to continue working with us, in between their semesters, so either Christmas or Easter, and if there's people who want to come back, then of course we're very happy to speak to them about the opportunity for them to do so. But it has to be mutual. But look, you don't ever want to tie people in, because, again, I go back to when I was young, what I wanted to do when I was maybe 18, 19, 20, or even 21, it does change. So you want to give people the chance and experience to be able to reflect for themselves, to decide to make the best choices for themselves. And if they decide that working for Allye is a choice that they want to make, then of course, great, because of, you want someone who wants to be here. If they don't want to go experience something else, that's also equally great, because you're giving them a platform to be able to make better decisions for themselves and hopefully find, greater contentment in the work that they do, more success in what they do. And hopefully, if they're interested in things that are in a, green transition, energy, that they're going to go and do something that can have a positive impact in the world. And that can only ever be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the big challenges that the green economy has, right? Separating battery storage from EV charging to wind, hydrogen, carbon capture, all of those fantastic sectors. It's the imminent influx of people that are going to be required, who both have the skills and the ability, but also the desire and the inclination to get involved in our sectors. And if they can leave Allye and go on to support other areas of the green economy, then that's a big win for us all as well. So, yeah. Fantastic. In terms then of the competitive advantage, maybe, do you think that businesses who invest in interns now will have a competitive advantage over the next sort of 5 or 10 years?
I guess it depends how they do it,
Yeah.
as always, there's leading indicators and lagging indicators of taking on interns. There's the direct impact of what they do for your business, their satisfaction, what they go on to do next, all that kind of stuff. But there's always some lagging indicators that you might not yet see the benefit of, but won't only materialize in a few years' time. Look, for an early stage business like ours, you're trying to build a positive reputation. You're trying to also build an employer brand. It's not like we're a Jaguar Land Rover or someone else that has the reputation and the image of being a larger company. So you can only ever do that by building positive experiences that people have for themselves, that then hopefully they can tell other people, and that also comes then from working with the universities. If you build the strong relationship with universities, they've got positive experience, students going to you, then it's more likely that they're going to help and support you with either, getting more interns in the future, but also, being a more positive advocate for us as a business. So, that kind of reputation building, I think, is fundamental, because this is the future generation. They're the working generation of tomorrow, and it's important to recognize that, we have a role and a duty to be able to support them, but hopefully that they will go forward with a positive image of what Allye is, how we've helped them, and they can use that to, say good things about us as a business in the future.
Yeah, fantastic. And as you say, very, very important as they grow up, and as Allye, who knows how big Allye will be in 15, 20 years' time. Right, yeah. To have lots of people saying about how great their experience was there, even if things didn't progress to permanent jobs, is going to be a massive win. Is there a bigger role for government and education providers in terms of connecting students with businesses like Allye?
Yeah, and I think that applies across the board. It's not just to do with undergraduates, graduates, and if I look at Germany, for example, which has historically a much kind of more practical and work experience based approach to supporting skills development. That is very much something I think is missing from the UK economy. And that's partially also why we're no longer, the heavy manufacturing, economy that we were before, much more of a service economy and so forth. If you think about the notion of apprenticeships and skills-based, development, not everybody is necessarily suited to going to university, nor is it the right thing to do in order to saddle yourself with a huge amount of debt. I think as a country, we need to be investing a lot more in that practical kind of experience much further on. And actually for the energy transition, I think that's a gap that is still unfulfilled within both policy and implementation. Think about all the type of people that are going to need to service, maintain, build, support everything from heat pumps through to, EV chargers, through to battery energy storage systems, everything basically. So I think that the whole practical skills development area is something that as a country, the UK, we massively underscore on. And we should be looking to other countries who do it far better and have also demonstrated a historical competency in doing it, like Germany, for example, where they're able to build those levels of skills. Otherwise, the danger is we end up putting all our eggs into one basket, and we also try to install and implement a lot of the key technologies that the environment and the economy is going to need, but without necessarily the skills base to support it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think our government tend to leave it far too much to private commercial businesses to go and lead, develop, train and encourage youngsters to get into certain industries, particularly the green economy that we work in now. And for me, I feel like that gives the big players an unfair commercial advantage over the smaller businesses, right? Because they're getting access to all of the people. And look, of course, some of them will get trained up, and the smaller businesses will then be grateful to be able to go and recruit those people out of the larger companies. But yeah, I think certainly way more needs to be done in terms of the government and education making links. You've got your contacts, have you, in individual universities, Jonathan? Not to get too deep and anything sensitive about how you do things, but is it one-off universities you go to?
Yeah, so we've got some relationship with some. That's either historically because some of us have been to those universities, But we also just put out general applications to, online and through our own networks to, try and find. I think you also have to be careful about the timing of it. So we try to time it specifically around kind of Easter time. It's a bit of that Herbie, go Herbie, kind of, you got to wait for the right time, because if you go too early, at the beginning of the year, the students are obviously thinking about, in different headspaces. And then some students tend to leave things a little bit later than others kind of stuff. So the kind of August, if you want to get summer interns, then of course the kind of Easter time is the optimal time to start activating, your push towards identifying, because otherwise you go too early or you can be too late, equally in the process. So, timing is everything, and it's also dependent on, who you're looking to bring in and where from. But some relationships with some universities obviously can be advantageous, because it gives you the opportunity to perhaps go and meet some of the students. You go to the university, they obviously can be more proactive about pushing your opportunity to the students and make them aware of it. So it's, it can help. But of course, we don't have a huge resource. We don't have a HR team. It's just me, kind of thing. Yeah. So we have to be able to manage our own, kind of resource and commitment, as much as, supporting the interns at the same time.
Understood. And I guess finally then, Jonathan, just in one sentence, why should companies hire interns?
Because they owe it to the next generation of talent to be able to support them with the development. And if you go in with an open mind, then you might be surprised by the benefits that you get from, supporting and encouraging, tomorrow's next bunch of leaders, basically.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining me. Lots of brilliant insights there, and hopefully the listeners and viewers have taken a lot from what we've discussed today. I think what really stood out for me is that interns, when given the right platform, they're not just there to learn, they can actually help lead the way and really can become the innovators of the future. So for anyone listening, whether you're running a startup or leading a global team, don't forget, investing in young talent could be one of the smartest ways to future-proof your business. So look, if you've enjoyed today's conversation, make sure you follow Net Zero Talent Talks for more discussions on how we can build the workforce to drive net zero success. Thank you again, Jonathan, and thanks to everyone for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to Net Zero Talent Talks. If you've enjoyed the conversation, make sure you follow the show and share it with someone who cares about building better teams in the green economy. I'm Lindsay Warren, and I'll see you next time for more insight, honesty, and practical advice to help you hire for a net zero future.